Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
I found a kid who swings a golf club like a dream. I'd like to try to qualify him for the U.S. Amateurs.
Coming to Apple TV Plus.
What's your name?
I'm not into older guys, but I'm flattered.
A new comedy series, Stick.
I don't want to go on this trip.
Your mouth's saying one thing, but those eyes are saying something else.
From the home of Ted Lasso.
This is your shot at redemption? This is your mulligan?
Owen Wilson.
This game takes and it takes. The game's finally giving me something back.
Stick.
You know Arnold Palmer?
Iced tea, lemonade, mix it.
I'm missing a nap for this.
Streaming June 4th on Apple TV Plus.
Oh, please do not try to tell me England doesn't have cults. I saw your entire country line up to stare at an old, dead, rich white lady. Ass.
The following podcast contains
tobacco, swear words, and yes, alcohol.
Explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you wanted me to do that to myself down there, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 442, which brings us back to go! And it's part one of Packing a Purple Shroud, and we're talking about Heaven's Gate, which ascended to the next level 26 years ago the week this comes out. Stay tuned. What the Hell We Think podcast is brought to you by the Temple of Dave Ascendant, who wants you to know Dave thinks well of you. At Dave Ascendant, we believe in two fundamental truths. Dave's an alright guy, and you should never do anything he does. A lot of new religions will tell you they know the universal truth. At Dave Ascendant, we tell you not to listen to any of them, even Dave, especially Dave. Just buy Dave a drink and get on with your life. No commandments, no funny clothes, no compounds in the desert, just buying Dave a shot of Jameson and then fucking right off to whatever it is you were doing in the first place. The Temple of Dave Ascendant. We may not save your soul, but hey, at least you get to keep your dick and balls.
It started, I think, with the Heaven's Gate people. That was the first sign that there was something desperately wrong in our culture. When 39 Americans killed themselves in a mansion. You don't kill yourselves in a mansion, you kill yourself in a shitty apartment like I live in. And they killed themselves in order to get to a mothership that was conveniently located out of sight behind the Hale-Bopp comet. 39 Americans. And they were collected by a guy who went around the country in the early 70s, and nobody stopped him. He said that his name was Bo, and he introduced his partner at these meetings that he had, and he said her name was Peep. That is look, this is in the public record. I couldn't even think this up. Okay? This is too good. He said to these people, my name is Bo, this is Peep. If I'm at a meeting, and the guy says, my name's Bo, this is Peep, guess what? End of meeting. We have nothing to discuss. I'm out of there, unless, of course, they're sheep. And if Peep is dressed properly, well, I'll stay around quite some time. How do we get to the mothership, Bo? What do we do? Well, we don't drink, we don't smoke, we don't do drugs, we don't have sex. Well, you'll have to kill me now. You've taken away all 4 food groups, I'm fucked. He actually told them if they wanted to continue to have sex that they should be castrated. 7 castrated themselves. I always thought that all of us had a little small voice of survival somewhere. I would think that would be the deal breaker. When you find yourself in the bathroom holding a weed whacker in your pecker. I believe that a little voice should go off, hey, I don't think this is the group we should join. Maybe we should try a bowling team.
The long-term listeners of this show,
2 of them, that's all.
know my views on religion pretty well.
Yeah, he's not a fan.
I mean, I grew up with 2 very religious parents, and I want to be clear, they were not weird about their religion for their generation, and given it was the South, they were both pretty normal about the God stuff. Like there was never any snakes or laying on of hands at any of the services they took me to. I mean, maybe they did that shit on a Wednesday night.
Guess this week is church on Sunday and Wednesday.
But I was always allowed to stay home. But on Sundays, it was all pretty normal church stuff. A lot of singing, shouting. My dad would turn red, stomp around in the aisles, praising Jesus at the top of his voice.
Pretty standard, really.
To their credit, they didn't push me to go to church once I got old enough to express my desire to not want to go. They very much regret that part now. And when I hit my early 20s, I went through something of a crisis over faith.
She broke your heart?
Who, Faith? No, God, no. She was a sweet girl. She was a stripper I met in El Paso. I'm talking about spiritual faith. I knew that I didn't believe what my parents believed, but I thought...
Yeah, we gotta believe something, you know?
And I kind of went on a vision quest to find my religion. I sampled most of the bigger faiths, or Methodists, Episcopalians, or Presbyterians, and then I turned my eyes towards the Eastern religions.
I'm Buddha. You're Bubba.
I'm Buddha now. All I gotta do is change 2 letters on my belt. Bubba, Buddha.
But none of them really seemed to work for me. Catholicism was never on the menu. I could get away with being an atheist, but if I came home Catholic, my mother was going to disown me.
We are not going to have this in our house.
For a very short period of time, I got big into pagan religions. Now, this was before pagans became synonymous with Nazis. You see, back in the 90s, there was this active internet Wiccan community where people pretended they were witches.
Wicked good and lovely, you're at the women power, and I'll be over here.
This was appealing to me not because I believed in the moon goddess or the power of white magic or any of that other bullshit, but because a lot of really hot, spooky women were into Wicca, and I heard that sometimes Wiccan rituals were performed what they called sky-clad.
She ain't got no clothes on.
And if I went to one, I was going to see some boobs. But, you know, as an ethical philosophy for life, seeing boobs seemed to be a little hollow. And eventually, I realized that what I believed in was...
There is nothing, nada, zip.
And all of this religious stuff just wasn't my bag. Which is good, because if you mess around too much in religion, you might wind up cutting your own dick off.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Yeah, well, religion does funny things to people sometimes. Which brings us to this week's topic, because this was the week in 1997 that America was first shocked and then subsequently highly amused that 39 members of a religious cult had committed suicide in order to rendezvous with a UFO hiding behind the Hale-Bopp comet.
That was not funny. Not funny, dude.
And yet we were laughing. And yet I'm still going to make jokes about it. So there we are. This week, I'm going to tell you the backstory behind the cult, and next week, I'm going to tell you how America took an objectively sad story and turned it into a punchline.
God bless America.
Before I can tell you about Marshall Applewhite and his band of believers, I need to set the stage for the kind of place America was when he got the band together.
I just think you love the sound of your own voice.
Clearly, I love the sound of my own voice. I do a podcast. Weird-ass religions are as American as apple pie and the oppression of minorities for financial gain. This is a country that experienced not one, not two Great Awakenings, but 4 of them. Now, there's a convincing argument made that we are currently in the midst of the 5th Great Awakening, except this time it isn't a spiritual message of peace, but a bunch of pissed-off white people replacing religion with politics.
'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
However, in this case, I'm specifically speaking of the 4th Great Awakening, which actually is still debated in academic circles. But you know what? I'm not an academic.
You wouldn't let me join with you, you black falling bastards!
So I am going to say that it existed. The 4th Great Awakening took place in the late 1960s and the early 1970s, and this is its Wikipedia summary. Quote, whether or not they constitute an awakening, many changes did take place. The mainline Protestant churches weakened sharply in both membership and influence, while the most conservative religious denominations, such as the Southern Baptist, grew rapidly in numbers, spread across the United States, had grave internal theological battles and schisms, and became politically powerful. Other evangelical and fundamentalist denominations also expanded rapidly. At the same time, secularism grew dramatically, and the more conservative churches saw themselves as battling secularism in terms of issues such as LGBT rights, abortion, and creationism. Many new religious movements emerged, such as the People's Temple and Heaven's Gate, and the corresponding rise of the anti-cult movement, unquote. By the end of the 1960s, America was in a very different place than it had been a decade earlier. And a lot of people took one look around and reacted, I would say, rather poorly.
I don't like it one bit!
As in any time of great social upheaval, there was the inevitable backlash, and in this case, it came in the form of a certain subset of people getting big into religion. The overwhelming majority of them went into conservative sects where the teachings of Jesus were, you know...
They're more like
like guidelines anyway.
Particularly when it came to things like loving your neighbor or blessing the meek. But for a small percentage, that still leaves a pretty big number of actual people. They gravitated into alternative religions. These alternative religions met the definition of the word cult in this standard way, meaning they worship a different kind of fake shit than the fake shit worshipped by mainstream religion. You had your bigger cults, the Hare Krishnas, the Children of God, even the People's Temple, but smaller cults exploded in the 70s with people embracing any number of crazy-ass ideas, coalescing around a charismatic leader who took all their money and had sex with them.
It's nice work when you can get it.
The vast majority of these groups lived fast, died young, and their members eventually moved on to other silly bullshit or just got old enough to understand that not wearing shoes and having lots of sex while people watched and chanted didn't really pay the bills. But for a very few of these groups, they continued long after most Americans had given up, took a bath, voted for Reagan, got jobs, and got on with the serious business of capitalism, which was and is the one true religion of this dumb country. It was into this febrile environment that one Marshall Herff Applewhite...
I'm sorry, what?
Herff. It's his actual middle name. I mean, people in his youth just called him Herff.
What does that word even mean, huh?
Well, the internet tells me that it was a term coined in the 90s during the cigar boom. See episode number 421 to learn all about that.
That's a plug.
And it described a group of people that gathered together for the purpose of smoking cigars. But I suspect that the origin of this term did not apply to Mr. Applewhite. Herff had the profound misfortune to be born into a world where he could not be who he truly was.
Aliens from another planet!
Sadly, no. The people in his youth probably could have accepted that about him rather than what he actually was. And what he actually was...
Gay? No, he's not gay.
Well, it was at least bisexual. And from what I can tell, Herff was primarily down with the dudes. Herff was born in Spur, Texas, a town that in 2024 has a Dollar General and an Alphabet's convenience store. And when they wrote the song Deep in the Heart of Texas, they were thinking about Spur. Lubbock is the nearest big city, and if you have ever been to Lubbock, which I have, you will know that it is neither big nor a city. In 1931, when Herff was born, the son of a Presbyterian minister, you can imagine that poor Herff had zero chance to explore anything in his identity that was outside of the norms.
Bury it deep.
He attended college, earning a bachelor's degree in philosophy. He married, had 2 children, and planned on attending divinity school with the intentions of becoming a minister like his dad, even though everybody who knew him didn't think that he was actually all that religious.
That's someone trying to convince himself of something.
Early in his studies, he left theology and began studying music. Herff was said to have a beautiful baritone voice and was an accomplished musician with a love of Handel. Drafted in 1954, he served in Europe and afterwards came home to attend the University of Colorado, where he studied musical theater.
Ah, there it is.
After a brief attempt trying to make it into the Broadway stage, which ended, sadly, like so many other men's careers in this unforgiving town.
I'm gonna start a podcast that has no focus.
Okay, first of all, fuck you, Gavin, that was mean. And second of all, we have a focus. Admittedly, it took us 5 years to find it, but we have one now. Where was I? Oh, right, we're talking about Herff. After not making it here, Herff went nowhere. I mean, geographically. He was teaching music at the University of Alabama, where he was well-liked, popular with students, and said to be a good teacher. But you see, Herff had needs.
Oh, I think I see where this is going.
He resigned from his position. Resigned is a nice way to say he quit one step ahead of being fired.
Well, he did that a lot. A lot.
Someone in the booth is just being very spicy today. Herff resigned over a consensual relationship with a student.
Not like you.
That was not the reason I had to leave. Someone's being very spicy today. The student was an adult, a young adult, but over 18, and in a modern time, it wouldn't be such a huge thing, because what's the point of being a college professor if you can't shtup your students?
No, Dave.
This affair unraveled Herff's life. His wife left him, his father disowned him, she took the children, and Herff moved to Houston, where he briefly lived the life of an out gay man. Though he did date a young woman whose family heard about Herff's other romantic interest and forbid her from seeing him. This was in 1965 in Houston, and it was still too early for the freaky life down south. He taught at another college and worked in the Houston music scene, but eventually lost that job because, well, you guessed it, He was stooping another student.
Keep it in your pants over there.
Around 1970, Herff's life took a turn. His father's death, his failure to become a professional musician, the pressure of living in a fucked up society that thought he was a pervert simply for loving the people he loved, caused Herff to have a bit of a mental breakdown.
Allegedly.
Details are sketchy, but some say Herff committed himself. Others say that Herff was committed against his will, and still others say he was never treated for any mental illness. But circumstantially, it seems pretty clear that he was in some sort of clinical setting, because that's where Marshall Herff Applewhite, a.k.a. Doe, met Bonnie Lou Nettles, a.k.a. T. Bonnie Nettles was a nurse, and exactly how she and Herff connected is intentionally obscure, because there's a very good chance that they met while Herff was in treatment for his mental health.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Bonnie was a wife, a mother of 4, a registered nurse, and by all accounts had that kind of happy, middle-class, suburban white lady life so often championed by the kind of people who believe that all women secretly yearn to be emotionally, intellectually, and sexually unfulfilled to this very day.
Well, you know how the Republicans are.
I will let the New York Times from 1997 take it from here. Quote, as an adult drifting from her Baptist upbringing, she would conclude that she had been born at other times as well, though all those lives preceded this one. Her husband, a businessman, was not so convinced. Their marriage of 23 years had been a gradual will, but what seemed to bring it to dissolution in 1972 was an overpopulation of spirits. Not only was Brother Francis, the long-dead monk, loyally at Bonnie's side, but she also called on other deceased souls through mediums. On Wednesday nights, the Nettles' living room was kept as dark as her circle group made still more connections with the beyond. Not surprisingly, Mrs. Nettles felt like something of an outsider in what passed for normal society, unquote. Bonnie was one of those folks in the late 60s and early 70s that we called seekers, and when Bonnie went searching, she found the occult. To be sure, there were spirits, seances, tarot readings, but there was also crystals, mystic energies, extraterrestrial entities, and of course, astrology.
Why wouldn't it be?
Because if you're going to go for the bullshit base package, you definitely want to splurge for the astrology add-on. So she met good old Herff, and she was primed and ready to jump aboard the crazy train. And when Herff met Bonnie, probably while undergoing some sort of treatment for mental illness, Herff was also going back to the Times, quote, at the same time, he found old answers no longer satisfactory for new spiritual questions. He had dipped into some trims of the time, the teaching of mystics, lone retreats into the desert, the literary science fiction of Robert A. Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke. He now believed that UFOs were the objects people had once taken to be angels. His friend, Mr. Parker, said an overwhelming notion about heavenly connections had entered his head, perhaps caused by stress or some genetic chemical time bomb, or a combination of both. In this frame of mind, many psychiatrists say Mr. Applewhite was vulnerable to paranoid disorders. You think? Sometimes a person who cannot handle reality makes up a new one, restoring self-esteem with a vainglorious idea of being God's special deputy. Persuading others can then be an important part of sustaining the fantasy, unquote. It's important that I stop right here and say to you, dear pod friends, that in no way do I think Marshall Applewhite tricked Bonnie Nettles, or Bonnie Nettles tricked Marshall Applewhite, or that one brainwashed the other into some sort of crazy delusions. This is very much a case of
One to twin powers, activate!
In which Marshall assumed the shape of a messianic cult leader, and Bonnie took the form of a batshit prophet of a fucking alien religion. This was two totally, deeply dysfunctional people finding each other and emerging as one big crazier entity when they tapped their rings together. There would be no Heaven's Gate without each of these two people meeting and combining their craziness. And as we shall see, Bonnie was the lesser of two crazies, but no one would know that for about 25 years until people started mixing applesauce with vodka and barbiturates. It did not take long for Herff and Bonnie to decide that they were touched by some greater power. What greater power?
You know, the usual.
What you need to understand about the theology of Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles was that it was, at its core, a Christian theology.
What about the alien spawn, sir?
Let me try to explain. Both Herff and Bonnie were raised Christian. More to the point, Protestant Christian in mainline denominations in a time where mainline Christianity was the dominant cultural religion of this country. Neither had been trained in any real comparative religion, examining the differences and similarities of humanity's belief in the supernatural and or divine. Everything they believed was filtered through a homogeneous religious culture of the southern United States, particularly the southern religious culture of the 1940s, 50s, and early 60s. Every American cult, and I do mean every American cult, simply takes the basic story of Judeo-Christianity and adds or subtracts elements to create their personal mythology. Be they Joseph Smith with golden plates and an angel named Moroni, or Jim Jones swapping a debased version of Marxism and himself into parts of the Bible, or David Koresh just adding themselves to the Bible. Even L. Ron Hubbard simply edited some penny-a-word science fiction characters into the Bible and charged morons $1,000 a page to read it.
Damn, man, respect from a brother.
There is nothing in Heaven's Gate that is not analogous to or directly taken from Christian teachings, the Christian teachings that Herff and Bonnie grew up with. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to tell you about the next level or the evolutionary level above human or why there was a spaceship behind a comet, because if you have even a passing acquaintance with Christianity, you already know the story. But if you need like a nut graph, I'll give you one from Wikipedia. Quote, Applewhite and Nettles pondered the life of St. Francis of Assisi and read the works by Helena Blavatsky, R.D. Lang, and Richard Bach. They kept the King James Bible and studied passages from the New Testament, focusing on Christology, aestheticism, and eschatology. And Applewhite also read science fiction, including works by Robert A. Heinlein and Arthur C. Clarke. By June, Applewhite and Nettles' beliefs had solidified. They had concluded that they had been chosen to fulfill biblical prophecies and that they had been given a higher level minds than other people. They wrote a pamphlet that described Jesus' reincarnation as a Texan, a veiled reference to Applewhite. Furthermore, they concluded that they were the two witnesses described in the book of Revelations and occasionally visited churches or other spiritual groups to speak of their identities, often referring to themselves as the two or the UFO two. They believed they would be killed and then resurrected and, in the view of others, transported onto a spaceship. This belief will be quite pertinent later on in our story. This event, which they referred to as the demonstration, was to prove their claims. And to their dismay, these ideas were poorly received by other religious groups, unquote.
Can't imagine why.
After trying their new revelation out in various Texas communities, the two, as they began referring to themselves, and then they started calling themselves T for Bonnie and Doe for Applewhite.
That's from a song.
Went on the road. Bonnie, by the way, completely abandoned her 4 children to head out on the highway with her spiritual twin. And though theirs was indeed a spiritual relationship, because to the best of anyone's knowledge, they never did,
Coitus, the beast with 2 backs.
Their chaste relationship would form the nucleus of what would become Heaven's Gate in later years. And unlike so many other cults of the 70s, fucking was not the central tenet of the faith. It was, as we shall later see, antithetical to the very idea of what the group believed, which, if you think about it for just like a second, a middle-aged white woman and a self-loathing gay man who both considered their lives ruined because of sex, in Bonnie's case, a husband and 4 children, and Applewhite's because his life's ambition of music because he couldn't keep his dick out of his students. Yeah, you can see why they realized that maybe sex wasn't working out so well for them. On the road, T and Doe would begin to assemble the group that would arrive at their final destination in San Diego some 20-odd years later. They traveled the country, not surprisingly the west coast of the country, which has long been the fertile ground for lunatics with a message.
I mean, look at Ronald Reagan, right?
They swept through the goofier communities, attending UFO seminars and posted classified ads in the newspaper.
I'm afraid I am not familiar with that name.
Classified ads were kind of like social media posts that you paid for so like-minded lunatics could find you or, buy your Buick. They gained their first follower in 1974, but she left them 2 months later to rejoin her family. probably because there was no drugs and no fucking going on. T and Doe dabbled in theft and credit card fraud because getting the cult off the ground required capital, and they lacked it, but never caught serious problems from the law, who met them, decided that a middle-aged couple of lunatics were probably mostly harmless, and let them go. Their biggest success came in Waldport, Oregon, and when in 1975 they managed to convince a group of 20 UFO believers to abandon everything and come along with them, the two, as they chased down the mothership that would lift them up to the next level. This particular incident made national news. Walter Cronkite had it on CBS Evening News, and I went looking for it, but it was a little obscure. So instead, I'm going to play this clip from HBO's documentary, The Cult of Cults, about Heaven's Gate, which I took a lot of background information on this from.
There was a short period of time when in isolation we went through an extreme awakening period. This is unimportant information. The only thing that's important is, can you shed humanness?
That's Marshall Applewhite, by the way.
And then hang on to your hat. Because from that point until the time you leave will be one major growth after another that will change you from a human into a member of that next level.
A matter of some months ago, those of us who were up here were sitting in a meeting similar to this, where you are, and listening to two individuals, a man and a woman, share some information with us. It's important to understand that you cannot die and achieve the level we're talking about. You cannot die and get to heaven. This level that we're speaking of is obtained only while you're alive and physically healthy in a way that you've never been alive before. We're not here to convince you of anything, but we know that there are a lot of people, at least some people, who are waiting for this information, and they will recognize it when they hear it.
Spoiler alert! That whole part about you can't achieve it if you die, we're more of a guideline, really. Over the next decade or so, T and Doe would spend their lives on the road with a fluid group of believers in their wake. The two never really seemed to have grandiose visions of some great church like Jim Jones or aspiration to bilk their followers for their wealth like L. Ron Hubbard. A member of the group was free to leave any time they wished, though contact with their families was discouraged, if not forbidden. At one point in time, T and Doe sent their minions out to spend 2 weeks with their families as a test of resolve. Some came back, some didn't. They would even send some followers off on missions, often to make money for the group, working at fast food or odd jobs, or just sometimes to see if they would come back, which was difficult coming back because they moved around without leaving a forwarding address a lot.
Lieutenant, contact Starfleet Command.
When the mission members came back, the group was gone. For a while, they lived in what they called a star base.
Bunch of goddamn nerds.
Where they built communications facilities in the woods consisting of largely stacks of old tires and a black and white television, which they would watch Star Trek.
The original series.
Oh, God, no. By this time, it was the late 1980s, and the far superior Star Trek was the obsession of Heaven's Gate.
Next Generation?
Exactly. But I'm getting way ahead of myself because around the time the rumors began spreading of a new captain of the Enterprise, a much darker timeline was beginning for the members of the next level, the followers of T and Doe, the true believers, the Heaven's Gate, who had stuck with Herff and Bonnie through all the weird shit and come together in what at the time was a bug shit crazy cult, but not all in all a dangerous cult. Many of their families did not understand what their loved ones were doing, but they all kind of acknowledged that their loved ones seemed healthy, happy, and, not doing drugs or fucking everything that moved, which was pretty much a step up from every cult that sprang up in the 1970s. However, things were about to change because the two, T and Doe, were getting ready to face the harsh realities of being born into this human flesh, because T was about to be brewed, strained, and drank down to the dregs by cancer, bringing us back to Doe, who fucking lost his goddamn mind. And that is where we will pick up next week with how things went very, very, very wrong. Is there lopping off of balls?
Sadly, yes.
So join us next week for part 2 of Packing a Purple Shroud, the story of the Heaven's Gate cult.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
That is it for the show this week. 26 years ago, we all turned on the television, heard 40 people kill themselves to get on a spaceship behind a comet, and asked, what the fuck now? It was a tremendous time to be alive. Next week, I'll tell you about it. So be sure to rate and review us on all the things where you get your pod things to go in your head holes. And if you want to kick us $1 for our discount rack Nikes, hit us up at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast. All the shows are ad-free and early over there. And hey, we are posting shorts and teasers for the show over on our YouTube page. We'll eventually get around to putting up whole episodes, just not with my face on it. No one wants to see that. So just search for What the Hell Podcast on YouTube or click the link in the show notes. And hey, the show is on Discord where you can chat with Gavin and tell him how much you think he's the real genius behind the show. Do all the things Jeremy tells you to do in the closing credits. Otherwise, he's going to put me in tomb time again, and I hate it there. And so for me, Dave, a name, I call myself Bledsoe. Producer, tea, a drink with jam and bread. Gavin, and all the fictional members of our away team, we want to say seriously, if you're in a group that even hints that castration is on the table, definitely move on. And we'll see you all next week for part 2 of Packing a Purple Shroud.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Twitter at @thehell_podcast, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
Me, I look better in purple.
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.